Hello. If you're watching this video, it's probably because you want to learn how to fly, and in particular a private pilot license. The process is divided into two streams, one which is the flight training, the part which you do in the airplane, and the ground training or ground school. And in this chart here, I've kind of pictured both of these separately. So up here is the flight training portion, and down here is the ground portion. So let's talk about the flight training portion. I can divide it into three parts. First, the pre-solo part, where you're flying exclusively with an instructor. And then once you go solo, in other words, you actually fly by yourself in an airplane, then after that you'd be alternating doing flight with an instructor and by yourself. So pre-solo, things that are required to get you to solo are, one, you need to get a student pilot permit. Now you don't have to do that before you start flying, but the first thing you want to do is to get a medical exam. Again, for that either you can start flying before you do the exam or before you have the license, the medical certificate back from Transport Canada. You can start flying, but you have to figure that getting access to a doctor and getting the certificate back from Transport Canada can easily take 5-6 weeks. So if you're in a rush to get to solo, get this done first. The other part is self-study stuff that you need to do. The radio certificate, Industry Canada has produced a document that you read and that you study, and then the exam is a multiple choice question exam. P-STAR exam, pre-solo test on aviation regulations. Again, Transport Canada in that case produced a document that gives 200 questions. You find the answers to those questions because they don't give you the answers. You find them and then you study them, and then the exam is there. So the pass mark for the radio operator exam is 70%, 90% for the P-STAR, but remember, the P-STAR, you've got the questions. So it's just a matter of finding what the answers and studying them. So once you have these three things done, then you can apply for the student pilot permit, and that's really a local thing that's done at the flight school or the flight training unit. And that's issued as a piece of paper that that says that you've met the basic legal requirements to do that. Now, of course, the big part of that will still be the flight training. And our experience has been, it usually is done around 20 hours, somewhat less for people that maybe have a better grasp of it, maybe a little bit longer for other people, but really how long it takes you to get to solo doesn't necessarily have much of an influence on how long it takes you to get your license after that. So don't get discouraged if you find that it's taking you a bit more than 20 hours to get to solo. It's not that important. So these things. Now, the other thing that I've mentioned here, noted here, is language proficiency test. This is an international requirement to be able to prove that you can speak in either English or French or any other language, really, that's approved internationally for international flight. In Canada, both languages, French and English, are possible, but if you want to fly outside of Quebec, then you really should pass the language proficiency test in English. While it's required, it's not legally requirement until the end here to get it, but Transport Canada has requested all flight schools to do it before solo. So solo is pretty exciting in itself. It's the day that you actually get to fly by yourself in an airplane. And most people that have done this remember their solo. It's just one of those things that sticks in your mind for the rest of your life. After solo, then approximately maybe 10 hours of dual, 10 hours with an instructor, 10 hours solo will get you to the last part here. And a lot of that is reviewing upper air work, which we call exercises like stalls and slow flight that you've done pre-solo, but getting you up to flight test standard on those. And the wrap up is really getting you for everything up to standard, but also it includes normally 2 cross-country trips, at least at our school it does, because you need a minimum of 5 hours of cross-country time, solo cross-country time. It includes also 5 hours of instrument flight, which would be done, of course, with a a device that hides your view from outside, so you have to fly just with the instrument on the instrument panel, of course with an instructor in this case. And then we do a pre-flight test, which is the equivalent of a flight test but done by an instructor. Again, typically this is going to be 15 hours dual, maybe 9 hours solo. And this, if you do well in the pre-flight test, will result in a recommendation for the flight test. If there's some items to be worked on a little bit, then that gets done before you get the recommendation. So recommendation for a flight test, we arrange to get an examiner to do the flight test for you, and that takes typically half a day to do it. There's a ground portion to it and an air portion to it. But we'll get to that some other time later on. Ground school, in our case at our school, at our club, we've gone away from the traditional means of doing this, and we have a ground school that's based on videos to do the training and seminars to do the homework. So you watch a series of videos, maybe about an hour's worth before each lesson, but the lesson is not actually a lesson in the ground school classroom. It's really a seminar where you work out and do homework with your colleagues, if you want, and with the help of the instructor. So we also have developed an online questionnaire, a database of many questions to help you practice for the multiple choice exam, which is the Transport Canada written exam. So basically the process here is you watch videos, you answer the questions, and attend the workshop at the club, and then of course some study. The minimum is typically 40 hours. That's what, sorry, not typically, the minimum Transport Canada requires is 40 hours. Ours, more practically, is 60 to 70 hours. So you can imagine, if you add all these numbers up here, maybe 65 hours of flight training and 60 to 70 hours of ground school training. There's quite a bit involved in getting a private pilot license. Typically, it takes maybe a year to do it. For most people, people can do it much faster. People who fly every day, like the air cadets, can do it in a month. People who fly 2-3 times a week perhaps may do it in 6 months. But the average person probably takes about a year to do it. So anyways, so basically once you have done the flight test, once you've gone the Transport Canada written exam, both of those things together then get you a private pilot license. So anyway, so that's just to kind of wrap all of this up. The private pilot license has 2 major sections, the flight training section and the ground training. Both of those together require a fair concentration over maybe a period of maybe a year if you want to do it. But it's really all throughout the process. You're flying, you're enjoying. Half of the time probably, but maybe a little bit, just a bit less than half of the time you're flying by yourself under the supervision of an instructor. But it's an amazing feeling, and it's an amazing thing to get through it. So thank you very much.